So, this is far from an original video idea. Almost everyone has a video ranking the star Pokemon, or finding the best star Pokemon, or making a star Pokemon tier list. But I had an idea for an experiment. I will be ranking every starter in every game, including the remakes, to see which is the best starter of all time. Until the next games come out. But first, I need to design a rule set. Something to standardize my ranking so that I can hopefully avoid bias. I will have the full rules listed in the description, but here's the condensed version. Each starter will be ranked individually, as if it were a single Pokemon playthrough. Basically, it's like those videos where people try to beat a Pokemon game with only a single weak Pokemon, but instead with a starter. I only considered the major battles in the story, which include gym leaders, Elite Four members, champions, rivals, and evil team leaders. Sorry, youngster Ben, you're not that important. I ranked each battle on a scale from 0 to 10, based on the usefulness of the starter in that battle. I ranked the hypothetical performance of each starter against the individual Pokemon on the opponent's team, and then I averaged the scores and rounded them up to the nearest whole number. The final scores are an average of all major story battles. So without further ado, here is my ranking of each Kanto starter. Come on, we all saw this one coming. The hashtag worst Kanto starter Pokemon is Pikachu in Pokemon Yellow. The biggest flaw with this Pokemon is its stats. Despite being the literal mascot for the entire series, the only change they made to the Star Pikachu in this game was preventing it from evolving. And while this sounds like a fun gimmick at first, let me inform you that Game Freak did not buff Pikachu's stats at all. Yes, the Pokemon with a base stat total of only 260 was given no evolution, no stat buffs, and no way to increase its stats. Have you seen those videos where someone plays through a Pokemon game with only a singular weak Pokemon? Well, this is that game if you play with just the starter. By the 5th gym, I had to start taking off points because Pikachu quickly becomes unviable after this point. That is where the majority of points are removed. Other than that, Pikachu just doesn't fare too well in Kanto. It starts off pretty bad, with it having terrible matchups against Brock and Erica, and an okay matchup against Lieutenant Surge. The only major battles where it has an advantage are against Misty and Lorelei because of their reliance on water types. And while Kanto does have plenty of water and flying types, not many of them appear on any major story battles. Surprisingly, Pikachu doesn't have any completely losing matchups, since the only fully ground-type team is Brock, who forgot to teach his Pokemon any ground-type moves. However, there has never been a bigger hashtag glow-up in Pokemon than the partner Pikachu in Let's Go. Pikachu in Yellow is a contender for the worst starter Pokemon of all time, but Pikachu in Let's Go is a contender for the best. The first big change is that partner Pikachu has buff stats compared to the vanilla Pikachu, making it viable into the late game. It also gets a few exclusive move tutor moves that are very broken and give it a lot of coverage. However, Pikachu still isn't great in Kanto. There aren't many water or flying type Pokemon in the game to make use of Pikachu's electric type moves. The only ones that come to mind are Misty and Lorelei again, along with Trace's Pidgeot. Also, there's not too many ground types that can wall Pikachu's best moves. I honestly do not know how Charmander became Pokemon's hashtag golden child, since it's honestly not that great. From the start, it struggles against Brock and Misty, and the only gym leaders where it has an advantage are Erica and Blaine.
Well, he is a platypus. They don't do much.
The main problem is that there are not many battles that have an abundance of Pokemon weak to fire. There are no bug or steel type gyms, and the Ice-type Elite Four member, Lorelei, mainly uses water Pokemon. And even though Charizard gets the Flying type upon evolving, there aren't many opportunities to use that. The main benefit that comes from it is that it removes Charizard's weakness to Giovanni's Ground-type moves. It does seem a little weird that Charmander does better in the original Red and Blue. You would assume that it would do much better in Gen 3, where it gets more to work with due to the changes in movesets, stats, and battle systems. But because of Gen 1's more limited mechanics, Charmander benefits quite a lot. Many Pokemon do not have stab moves in some battles, which really benefits Charmander. Gym leaders like Brock, Giovanni, and Lorelei don't have many rock and water type moves, which have the potential to really hurt Charmander, or even worse, Charizard. Based on what I've seen in the Pokemon community, it is generally accepted that Bulbasaur is the hashtag best Kanto starter, and that is a fair point. Bulbasaur's selling point is that it absolutely demolishes the first 4 gyms. It destroys Brock and Misty, and it has defensive advantages against both Lieutenant Surge and Erica. But after that point, Bulbasaur falls off so much. It does bad against Koga's poison types, worse against Sabrina's psychic types, and even worse against Blaine's fire types. And after the 4th gym, the only battles Bulbasaur has an advantage in is Lorelei, but also not really because of her Ice-type moves. Even Giovanni can be a struggle because of Nidoking and Nidoqueen. The main problem is that Bulbasaur only really learns Grass and Normal-type moves, and this really limits its effectiveness outside of types that are weak to Grass. Even in Fire Red and Leaf Green, the only other non-stab, non-normal type moves it gets are Rock Smash and Earthquake, which don't really help with the battles Venusaur struggles in. One thing I have to mention is, despite getting the same score in both generations, Bulbasaur gets quite a few different scores in Red and Blue compared to Fire Red and Leaf Green. Kinda weird how that works out, right? Eevee is probably the most fascinating and boring starter Pokemon to talk about. On one hand, it does a pretty good job against almost every major battle. On the other hand, the only reason it does good is because it is the partner Eevee. This specific Eevee has the benefit of learning 8 exclusive move tutor moves, 1 for each evolution. Despite it having no clear type advantage or disadvantage in most battles, it has the upper hand because of its varied moveset. But after that, there's just not much else to Eevee. Being a normal type has the weakness of not being able to deal super effective stab damage. Eevee has good enough stats to stay viable into the late game, but only having a type advantage against Agatha really hinders its usefulness. It is truly a jack-of-all-trades Pokemon, and while that does benefit its overall effectiveness, it comes with the cost of not filling a niche role of any kind. I honestly thought that Eevee would end up on top, but I did not see this next one coming. In preparation for this video, I put a poll out on my Tumblr to see what people thought the best starter was, and I decided to vote myself, so I guess Squirtle. This is when I had just started my research, and I honestly just wanted my favorite Kanto starter to win. Little did I know that Squirtle was hashtag underrated. I think many people write off Squirtle early because it kinda struggles in the early game. It does great against Brock, and it can hold its own against Misty, but after that it gets demolished by Lieutenant Surge and Erica right in a row. And honestly, those are the only fights that Squirtle completely struggles in. The benefit to being water type is that your only weaknesses are grass and electric, and Kanto doesn't have many grass or electric types, and it has a ton of ground and rock types. Looking into the late game, Squirtle does pretty great. It has an obvious advantage against Blaine, Giovanni, and Lorelei, which are pretty much back-to-back fights. And if you pick up the Ice Beam TM in Celadon City, Squirtle outperforms the other starters against Lance, and it gains an advantage against Blue's Pidgeot. It can also use this to defend itself against Erica. Squirtle even does a little better in the original Red and Blue because of its more limited mechanics. Blastoise doesn't suffer from the restricted movesets since it still gets ice and ground coverage moves. And the opponents have the opposite problem. One benefit is that Koga's Coughings and Wheezing do not have the ability Levitate, since abilities didn't exist yet, so Blastoise can use Dig on them for super effective damage. So here we have the final rankings of the Pokemon. Honestly, I'm quite surprised at how this turned out. I was expecting some big changes like with Pikachu between Yellow and Let's Go, but some of the differences really surprised me. Like, how did Charizard get a better score in the generation it can't get a flying type move? The scores also came out more average than I expected. I thought I'd be seeing more 2s or 8s in the final rankings, but everything seems pretty average, all things considered. I did try to keep things as objective as possible, but there really isn't a way to do that, so take my opinions with a grain of salt. No matter what starter you choose, I'm sure you'll have a fun time playing the game. You can comment down below if you disagree with my rankings, and let me know what your favorite Kanto starter is. Thanks to those of you who suggested this video series on my Tumblr. I'm going to try and do a ranking for each main series game, including Legends Arceus, so watch out for the Johto starter rankings soon. I don't know if you noticed, but I just got a new microphone and a new drawing tablet, so my art and audio are getting a lot better. Again, thank you so much for watching my videos, and if you have any suggestions or advice, leave them down in the comments below.